Good evening to one and all. On behalf of our principal, Dr. Sister Rosie Joseph, management and faculty of the Department of Commerce shift to Stella Maris College, it is my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to this webinar on ICT tools for teaching, testing, and evaluation. The COVID pandemic has realigned the focus of teaching. It has mandated the use of ICT tools. In the COVID and post-COVID times, we as a teaching fraternity will have to be tech savvy to combat the seismic shift in the method of delivery. Hence, we thought it to be appropriate to choose this as the topic for our seminar. I extend my sincere gratitude and welcome our three speakers for today, Dr. Abe Kuruvilla, Dr. Suresh Chalasani, and Dr. Terry McGovern. Let us begin today's webinar by invoking God's blessings. God, our loving Father, we praise and thank you for giving us this new day. Thank you for giving us this unique opportunity to connect with experts from across the globe. During these uncertain times, we pray that you may protect us and our families. Amen. I would now like to introduce our speakers for today. We are very fortunate to have three eminent speakers address our participants all the way from the United States. I would like to introduce our first speaker for today, Dr. Abe Kuruvilla, Executive Director, International Affairs and Associate Professor, Business University of Wisconsin, Parkside, USA. Dr. Kuruvilla teaches operations management both at the undergraduate and MBA levels at the university, and cross-cultural communication and negotiation in his overseas appointments. Dr. Kuruvilla travels extensively as a visiting professor to many countries and has worked on over 400 community-based projects. A man of many laurels, we are delighted, sir, to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, our next speaker for today is Dr. Suresh Chalasani, Associate Dean for Non-Traditional Programs in the College of Business, Economics, and Computing at the University of Wisconsin, Parkside. With over 25 years of experience, Dr. Chalasani has been involved in all aspects of the teaching lifecycle. His research interests include using information technology for healthcare applications and business supply chains. A recipient of several awards, we are thrilled, sir, to have you with us today. Our
Good.
third speaker today is Dr. Terry McGovern, a double doctorate holder. Dr. McGovern has several qualifications to his credit. Dr. McGovern's area of expertise include professional development, strategy, and leadership. Sir has taught a wide range of courses at both the graduate and undergraduate level in various delivery formats. We are delighted, sir, to have you with us today. Sir will be joining us towards the end. With that being said, I now invite our extremely eminent speakers to take over. Over to you, Dr. Kuruvilla and Dr. Chalasani.
Hello, good evening to everyone. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the bold leadership of Stella Maris College to be able to handle COVID and respond in this manner. And one of the things that we think about in leadership is how we respond to challenges. And I think this is a wonderful example of how the leadership at Stella Maris responded in hosting this seminar and bringing together faculty from around India to be able to learn from each other about what we can do in an environment that is not very familiar to many of us, right? We are all learning, we are all improving, we are all trying to catch up with the times. Our students are doing the same. And as teachers, we do the best we can in the environment that we are placed in. And we believe that the steps that we do and we take are going to be significant because these are the milestones and stepping stones that that actually might define higher education, moving forward for centuries. So I think we are at a very pivotal point, and I want to congratulate Stella Maris for leading this seminar. I also want to say thank you to all the faculty that have tuned in. This is not an easy time at 6 p.m. in India. You have your children, you have your families, you have your parents, you have to make food, you have to do so many things tonight. But still to be able to take time off from important family matters and set apart that time to be able to learn more about online education and what we can do in terms of best practices is commendable. So I do want to thank you for the time that you are spending learning about this. And I do want to thank my colleagues as well, Dr. Chalasani and Dr. McGovern, that we were all able to come together at this time. And it's 7:30 in the morning for us. So it's a fresh start for us, although it's the end of the day for you. That we are all able to share our experiences and learn from each other about how we respond to the situation. I thought I'll start us off with, excuse me, with talking just a little bit about the university, because the panel today is a representative from the University of Wisconsin Parkside. We are a rather small university, I would say, but we have one of the most beautiful campuses. So we are located just north of Chicago, about an hour and a half north of Chicago if you fly into Chicago. And we are between the cities of Chicago and Milwaukee. You may have heard of Milwaukee as well. So we are in the economic corridor between Chicago and Milwaukee. And that economic corridor boasts some of the largest companies that we've all heard of. So headquarters of Harley Davidson is located right here. The headquarters of Jockey International, which we all know in India, is located here. And several other international and global companies that are headquartered here. It's also one of the fastest growing areas in the state of Wisconsin, just because of recent large businesses and investments in the area that are creating new jobs and creating new opportunities and overall enhancing education levels in this region of the United States. So we are really very proud, actually, to represent UW Parkside. The University of Wisconsin system has 13 universities in the state of Wisconsin. And University of Wisconsin Parkside is on the southeast corner. We are, like I said, between Chicago and Milwaukee. And to our east, about 3 miles, is Lake Michigan, which is one of the largest freshwater bodies in the world, and a beautiful lake. And we are on 700 acres. So that is another thing that we are very proud about, 700 acres of land and forests and prairies that our students can use. We have a small student body of 4,500. And we have several international partnerships across the world. And my responsibility is international partnerships. And we are always looking for new partners and new agreements. So if any of your institutions are thinking about collaboration overseas, we should definitely have a conversation. That is just about our university. I think quickly talking about our response to COVID. Of course, it took us all by surprise. We all had to make this decision about going fully online. I do think we were a little bit better prepared than many of the universities in the region. Because our bandwidth was good. We had recently just doubled our bandwidth. Many of our classes were online. Several of the online and distance education programs, and actually the overall distance education and online learning environment for the University of Wisconsin system is led by Dr. Chalasani. And so just having been prepared with online degree programs that we had launched, I think we had a higher level of preparation than a lot of universities in the region. And I think we responded exceedingly well. But we're all learning and we're all improving. And so we hope that this would be an opportunity for us to chat a little bit about what we learned and what we are able to share and what we continue to learn on a regular basis. I'll turn it over to Dr. Chalasani, who can start us off by talking a little bit about the learning management systems that are available, and then we'll just continue this. So thank you again and a warm welcome.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Once again, hope your day went well. And as I start this seminar, I hope everyone can see this PowerPoint presentation without any difficulties. I'm going to put it in the presentation mode so we can go to this slide. One of the key things that you would hear from us today is a learning management system. And there are quite a few learning management systems that are available for us to deliver courses online. And one of the learning management systems is Blackboard. For those of you who do not have a learning management system yet, you can get a free version of Blackboard at this link, and it does provide a very robust beginning learning management system for you to start your courses in. In the UW system, we used to use Brightspace Desire to Learn as a learning management system, the third one on this list that I'm pointing to, until a couple of years ago. And the UW system, University of Wisconsin system, all the 14 colleges and the universities in the UW Wisconsin system moved to Canvas just 2 years ago. And in many, many ways, Canvas is a much better learning management system compared to some of the other tools that are available as LMS. So we keep talking about learning management systems, but what is a learning management system? So let's take a look at what the learning management system can do for us. Uh, Learning management system, if you want to define it in just one sentence, it's everything about the course in one place. For example, you would be able to see the students that are enrolled in the class. You would be able to look at how many students are enrolled, and you would be able to put them into groups. So for example, I have a class with about 36 students right now, and then I put them into 6 groups each using the class roster. So they could engage in group discussions, group projects, and so on and so forth. It has all the course content and the resources that you want the students to utilize as reading materials and so on and so forth in one place. It has syllabus with due dates. We have, for example, at the MBA level, we have 7-week classes, and at the undergraduate level, at the bachelor's level, we have 15-week classes. So the syllabus with when everything is due, when the exams are there, when they should take the exams, all those details are there in the learning management system. As you develop your course content, all your commentaries, all your examples, every document that you place. So for example, if you have the PowerPoint slides that you want to share with students, it's all there in the learning management system. As you create your video lectures, your .mp4 files as shown as videos, all those things are part of the learning management system. The assignments, exams, quizzes, all kinds of things that the students need to take and demonstrate their proficiency to pass the class, that is also there in the learning management system. And one of the key things that is that you would find it very interesting is that all the learning management systems come with the facility to, or the ability to open and close the assignments and the content at specific dates and times. So for example, if I want my exam to open up on June 15th at 2 p.m. and close at 4 p.m. on June 15th on the same day, just 2 hours, I could do that. The LMS provides an easy mechanism for me to accomplish that. As you move online, you'll find that discussions are a very key tool for us to keep students engaged. We'll come to student engagement just a little later. But the fact is that in terms of discussions, there is student-to-student interaction that you want to promote. And at the same time, you also want to promote student-professor interaction. Many of the students in our examples, they have a lot of work experience. They're working outside and they want to share what their work experience is with the class, relevant to the subject material that we are teaching in the class. And that student to student interaction is fostered through discussions. If students have questions about the course content, they're confused about something, they could even ask the professor. We have an Ask the Professor discussion board where they could post their messages, and we can respond as instructors and professors. Students can submit their work, whether they are documents, spreadsheets, databases, PDF documents, Word documents. In fact, there are a few courses where we also require them to create their own video presentations and then upload the video presentations, and they do that in this learning management system. When we grade their assignments, when we grade their exams, assignments, quizzes, we always leave feedback on those assignments, and that's captured in LMS. uh, and the grades, if you have like 15 things that they need to do over a 7-week period, and all those grades, numeric grades, are maintained for each student in the LMS, you can also have formula to compute the overall grade and then automatically translate it to a letter grade like A minus, and so on and so forth. One thing that the learning management system does quite well is announcements. So, for example, every week I post like 2 to 3 announcements saying that, hey, I am this week, these are the important concepts. I want you to read these things. So pay much attention to some of the pitfalls as you try to complete the assignments. Similarly, if I'm backlogged in grading, I'll tell them that I would need a couple of more days to complete grading the previous week's exam. So those announcements are very much handy, so that we can keep students in the loop with how the course is going. One last but not least is this point on this right hand side, email integration ability. Many learning management systems offer this. What it means is that if you are using Microsoft Outlook or some other email tool, you can integrate the messages that you generate through the learning management system with your email platform. So, for example, my students send me an email through Canvas. Canvas is our learning management system. When they want to send a message, they don't have to go to their email and then try to find my address and then send it to me. But instead, they could type it in Canvas, and Canvas delivers to my email inbox. Now, Dr. Kuruvilla would talk about the synchronous online courses and some of the best practices for student engagement in synchronous courses.
Thank you, Dr. Chalasani. Like Dr. Chalasani said, there are so many online LMS systems that are available, and some of them are free, and some of them are you do have to pay for it. When it comes to security, we as a university, we do have to go with something that we have to pay for. So assuming that you have purchased the learning management system that suits you the best, whether it's Blackboard or Moodle or Canvas or whatever you are using, the next step, and we'll go through some demonstrations following this, but the next step for us is, how do you actually deliver an online class? What does an actual setup look like? So in some of the learning management systems, but also in some of the meetings, and you're all familiar with this because you've used Zoom, the normal thing we do is get into Zoom or some of the other packages like Google Hangouts, and then be able to start the class. So I want to talk very briefly about a few areas in a synchronous class that can actually keep a class engaged as much as possible. One of the things that we have to remember is that we are in the 21st century where everybody has a device that everyone is looking at all the time, right? So this is not something new. This is not something that we are coming with a disruptive technology in order to be able to teach a class. Everybody is online. Everybody is watching videos. So for a generation like that, and not just a generation like that, the majority of the populations that have a smartphone are doing that. So we are in an environment where people are spending a significant amount of time on their devices. And what are most people doing? What are most people looking at? They are looking at, it might be YouTube, it might be Instagram, it might be, Facebook, or long periods of time on Facebook. And as we know, even TikTok, right? So The population that we are trying to serve is a population that is actively engaged in technology. And so as teachers and as faculty, we have the opportunity, I call it deliberately the word opportunity, to be able to engage that generation using that technology. But then I think we also have to look a little bit at that technology. What does a TikTok video look like? I'm sure all of you have looked up TikTok videos, right? They're the most slickly produced videos that are extremely of very short length, right? They might be just a few seconds. And so that speaks a little bit about the attention span of this generation. We used to say that it's not more than 20 minutes. The attention span of this generation is not more than 20 minutes. And we all know that that is significantly changing now. As we get bored with any lecture, or any documentary or any talk that's beyond 5 minutes, and it doesn't capture, the opening doesn't capture us, then we are off to the next thing. We are off to the next movie. We ask, do we really want to watch this movie, or do we move on? So in that environment, I think we have an opportunity as faculty to be able to produce content that is engaged, that is active, and that is involved, and that captures the attention of our students. I think if we start with the idea that let's just deliver our lectures, because this is something we have to do, then I think we have to change that mindset, right? If we say, let me finish this lecture because this is what I have to do, and this is what the management wants, or this is what the university or the college wants. I just want to deliver this 1 hour lecture and be done with it. I think that if that's the case, then I think we are probably not even in the right profession. We are thinking like that. But I think if you think about it as an opportunity to be able to use technology in an environment where everyone is actively engaged, and then facilitate learning, right? Because that is how teaching is going to be. That is how higher education is going to be. It will be more about facilitating, which is what we're seeing right now, as opposed to standing in a class and teaching. Then I think we can approach this in a very different way, right? And the way we think will be different. So what is a video or a photograph on Instagram or TikTok look like? It's a very slickly produced. There's a great background. There's good lighting. There is there's usually a selfie light around and things like that, right? So a few key things to remember when we set up the way we do synchronous teaching is we do have to look at the camera. We do have to place the camera as close to the screen as possible. We want to be able to not look away to a screen or our notes or anything like that as much as possible. So a few things that I like to do is if I start out a class, we use something called BadX, which is through Cisco. You can start a meeting and you can get involved in a meeting, and there are multiple things that you can do. But you want to make sure that that you are at the eye level of the camera. You want to make sure there is no glare, because that can be very distracting. Especially if you wear glasses, then you can have a glare. If you're facing a window, then it can be a little bit positive and better. We all know that there are going to be distractions. We are all people that have families. We have children. We have parents. We have people that can, and many of us may not have a dedicated space where we can actually teach quietly, right? We may have doors that open. So I just use that as an opportunity to say, I have 5-year-old twins, and this is true. I have 5-year-old twins. And so my students are prepared that anytime, my students, even though my door at the back is locked over here, my kids have figured out how to open the door from the outside. And I cannot control that, right? And so I have to find a way to embrace that and just say, whether it's in a meeting that I am or whether it's in a classroom, I'll just say, my kids may pop in at any time. They might just open the door, which is okay. And, frankly, that turned out to be a beautiful human moment, because a lot of my students got to see my kids and my family, And I'm a dad, I'm a father, I'm trying to raise children as well, along with my family. And so there's a little glimpse of that this world of our students can probably see and appreciate. And we should not be embarrassed about that. We should allow ourselves to think that it's okay, we are all disrupted, and these kind of things are bound to happen. In teaching in a synchronous class, a few things that we can do. Unfortunately, I'm not able to open WebEx at the same time that I have this video running, because then the video on both of the softwares does not open at the same time. But we have opportunities to manage notifications. So for example, if a student is logging into the class at a certain time, we can hear the notification, or we can say we do not want to hear the notification, right? If a student wants to raise their hand, then we can say, we can allow that to be visible and be seen. We can allow a student just to interact with us as a teacher, or we can allow them the opportunity to interact with everyone else in the class. So these are controls that we can have in which we allow, okay, interaction will only be with me, or interaction will be with the entire student. I allow all students to interact with all of us because I see it as a community of learning together. How students respond, right? So in an online synchronous environment, a few key things we can do to set up for success is coming in a few minutes early. I like to come in about 5 minutes early, and there are a few students that might be a little familiar. They may have difficulty asking questions publicly in a class, and so, but if you're alone with them for 5 minutes, then they might ask some questions. So when you log on 5 minutes early and you see another student, you can say, "Hey, Brad, how are you doing? How are things going?" And then he might respond right away, or she might respond and ask you a question. And so we can take that opportunity to engage a little bit more, whether it's just by text or whether it's by audio. So we have to look at those kind of opportunities. The other thing I also do is I stay back after the class and I say, I'm available to interact and chat if anybody would like to have a conversation about anything, right? And so some of the students they do that, right? A lot of students don't like to raise their hands in class. They don't ask questions publicly. But then if they get an opportunity with you alone, then they would stay back and they'll ask you a question. So it might be a personal decision that they are, figuring out, or it might be something, regarding strategy or a job or a recommendation letter or an interview that's coming up. These are extremely powerful moments that we can really use to be able to connect. And even though they might be just outside or just later or before the class, they're very powerful moments to really be able to engage the class. A few things, a few other key areas, and I want to move on just because, we have a limited time. And I'll talk more when we talk about some of our other classes, but asking questions, right? And so if we have the opportunity for people to respond, ask a question, asking, what do you think? Can you think of an example of how a company is able to keep costs as low as possible? And so can you think of an airline, right? I teach operations management. And so usually, people will chat or they'll say, okay, it's Southwest Airlines, or it might be Indigo in India or some other airline, right? And so tell them to think a little bit about, how do you think they reduce cost? Well, they don't have food. They charge for baggage. They ask you for a printout of your boarding pass. They don't allow you to board if you don't have that, a different example, right? So that is one way of keeping students completely engaged. Another thing to do is asking them for a poll. And you have the opportunity to do a poll in a classroom where a vote, and say, how many of you think that in the news today, this company, Jet Airways, for example, responded properly to this pandemic, or responded properly to the government investigation, or whatever it might be. And you create a poll. It's very easy to create, a question with 2 or 3 answers. Yes, no, maybe, no answer, right? And you can see the results of the poll right away. So you might say 60% responded, and say, oh, well, that's interesting that 60% responded. And 20% said no, and 20% said they don't have an opinion. That's another way to quickly engage the classroom and make sure that students are not distracted. Because we all know they're opening other browsers and they're opening other, other websites. And if it gets boring, then they are involved in other things. And so that's not something that we can control at all in this environment. So the key thing is, how do you keep, students engaged? One of the greatest advantages we have in a synchronous classroom is that we have the names of all the students displayed. And this was one of the greatest gifts for me because, I have a class of 40 students. Very hard for me to keep the class engaged, but not engaged, but very hard for me to remember all the names and call out at the beginning of the semester. But here, I have all the lists out for me. And so I can just look at a name and say, hey, what do you think about this? Give me a response. Emily, can you share some example from your life about, how you experienced an airline that had low cost? And things like that. So we can call out names, and that keeps people engaged. But I think some of the key things are keeping your eye, on the camera at all times. And if you have a PowerPoint that has too many lines on it that you're reading, then that doesn't help at all, And so the key thing to do is have a PowerPoint that has maybe 2 or 3 lines. And we're all teachers. We can do this, right? We've grown up doing this, is be able to use our own words and not read. And I think finally, I just want to end with, don't be stressed out. Because I think everyone is stressed out with the online environment. There's a lot of pressure from, maybe leadership. There's a lot of pressure from your student community. You're trying to create, what you can with WhatsApp. And there are so many difficulties along the way, right? But we have to, this is part of life. So we have to see it as something that cannot stress us, something that it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to, pause for a second. If you ask a question and students are not answering, it's okay to have silence, and I encourage that. I'm like, I'm not going to move on till someone responds, right? And there'll be a silence in the class. And at some point, someone will get uncomfortable and then they'll start to speak a few words. And so then, it breaks the monotony of the class as well. So staying away from monotony, getting students engaged, getting polls, asking questions that people can respond. I found are effective ways to keep the class engaged in terms of just general engagement. So I think we have to look at this as an opportunity for us to all learn and grow. And online environments are just that. They're an opportunity for us to learn and teach a class in a synchronous way. And in fact, replicate what we do in class on a day-to-day basis. But I think there are opportunities in an online environment to do better than what we do in a face-to-face class, just because of examples like names that we can call out, the fact that we can look face-to-face, the fact that we can be in comfortable clothes. We don't have to be in uncomfortable clothes like we typically do, when we go and teach. So those are my key things. Dr. Chalasani will talk a little bit more about asynchronous teaching, and if you're not face-to-face in a class, then what are some things you can set up for students to do outside the classroom, or if they're not online, it's not an online class, and a lot of it is self-taught and self-paced. So over to Dr. Chalasani.
Thank you, Dr. Kuruvilla. So um, for the asynchronous online courses, I divided this into two separate areas. When you create the course, when you design the course, that's one area where you want to be very cognizant of the asynchronous nature and design it in such a way that students are engaged. And then we'll come to course delivery. When it comes to course design, the first thing that I would like to point out is that students learn when they see the relevance, when they see how it is useful for them. It's like human nature, right? So if it's not relevant, if it's not too important for us, why bother, right? So one of the things that you all probably are already doing, you're all veteran teachers, so veteran professors, so I don't have to say this, but make it very practical. Take the theory, not only teach the theory, but make it very applied in terms of the content. Some of the examples that I take in my classes are take the famous sports figures and throw fictitious examples. So I have taken this type of an example in my business analytics classes, right? So let's say that you have the Tendulkar and Dhoni, they both retired, and you are the sales manager, and you hired both Tendulkar and Dhoni. They have been selling for the past 1 year, 2 years, or whatever the time frame might be. And your manager comes to you and puts pressure on you to fire one of them, to make sure that you only retain one of them. Who would you retain on your sales team? This is an example I use in business analytics. So you want to set this context, you want to set this case with a few paragraphs, and then you give them the data uh, to show what are Tendulkar's sales and what are Dhoni's sales, and then they would have to you teach them statistical testing, like a t-test, for example, to compare the sales and make an data informed decision rather than your allegiance to one of the superstars, right? So that's how you could make the content very relevant. Take examples, make them exciting, so that students are very motivated to learn the subject. The second thing that I can't emphasize enough during course design is instructional videos. A lot of times students have difficulty with certain concepts. So if you can create instructional videos and then place them as part of the course. As we demo some of these courses a little later, we'll be able to share some of these videos. That would be wonderful from a student perspective. Then they could listen to your lectures at any time they want. They can pause it, they can go back if they did not understand something well. And so the rule of thumb is that any concept that you feel students will find difficult, if you have short videos like 5 minutes long to explain that concept, that would be great. In my 7-week classes, for example, I have close to about 40 videos that I have narrated myself, that I have created myself. And then those are very, very crucial for students to learn. If you cannot create some of these instructional videos, you might want to look on the YouTube for uh, videos on similar topics and then bring them into your class. That is also another thing you can do. But students like that one-on-one connection with the professor who is teaching the class rather than somebody else's video. That is the caveat there in terms of using someone else's video. While the course is going on, during the course delivery time, you do want to make students comfortable. So in the very first couple of days when the course starts, I ask that students introduce themselves. I give them a few brownie points, very few points in the course for introductions. And I ask students to respond to each other's introductions. I also respond to each one of them so that they feel comfortable in terms of the social setting in the classroom. And then Professor Kuruvilla talked about discussions, and the discussions are a way to learn together. So I pose questions on the course topics, they respond, and then through discussions, I do correct them if they're completely off the track, and I will ask them to go in a different direction. Um, the third thing during course delivery, a very, very crucial thing is feedback. In the online courses, they're learning through videos. That is all good. That's all nice. But the amount of feedback that you provide in response to their exams and assignments, that plays a key role. So, for example, in my feedback, I not only provide the text feedback, but in some of the technical assignments, I provide corrected spreadsheets, whether it's Excel spreadsheets, and sometimes there are databases that they need to create in my technical assignments. And then I correct those database files, and then I post them back saying that, hey, you went wrong in this. You might want to look at it because this would be on the exam. For you to succeed in the exam, you might want to look at my corrected database file so that you will be able to do it better at the exam time. Um, the office hours in asynchronous online courses, we are not having a regular face-to-face, regular class time through video conferencing, but I do hold a similar amount of office hours. If the class meets 3 hours, I would hold 3 hours of office hours. I might make the first one of those hours 3 hours on 3 different days, so I can accommodate students based on their schedules. And I would ask them, I would make it mandatory for at least one of those office hours. They should come in, they should check in with me, and then ask me questions or share what they're doing in terms of the completing the assignments for that week. And the remaining office hours, if it's a 3 hour office hours on 3 separate days, they have to come in on at least one of them, and the remaining are, if they need more assistance, they could come in through office hours. Office hours, like Professor Dr. Kurvila mentioned, they could be through a video conferencing tool like WebEx or Blackboard Collaborate, there are Zoom, any of those provide very good platforms for connecting with students. Similarly, announcements, like I mentioned earlier, announcements are a way to keep students motivated by sending them once in a while where the course stands and how the course is progressing from your perspective, and what they should be focusing on that week of the course. Now, Dr. Kuruvilla would uh, demonstrate a course that he teaches in operations management.
Hello again. Regarding office hours, I think that is a great point that Dr. Chalasani raised. It's one way to keep students engaged. I think one of the not advantages, but one of the just the way the education system is here in the US is that faculty are able to create their own syllabi, and so that might be a little bit of a challenge in other countries. But we can create whatever we want, and we think is relevant for. So I teach operations management. For an MBA class, I can create my own syllabi. For an undergrad class, I create my own syllabi and then deliver the content based on what the syllabi is. And I'll always call it a tentative syllabus. The only reason is that times are changing, right? There might be a new, like what happened this semester, right? Everything went online, and so I have the ability to be able to change the syllabus even mid-semester, and be able to go to a complete online environment if necessary, or whatever I think is most relevant for students to be able to understand operations management effectively. And so what I'd like to do is in the office hours, I have extra credit for students to have office hours, which basically means that in the syllabus that is handed out in the beginning of the semester, I'd say 2 credit points or 2 percentage points, extra credit percentage points, if students come and spend 15 minutes with me, in class, no, outside class, I'm sorry, and have office hours. And what is an office hour? Office hour is not necessarily only to talk about operations. It may be to understand a little bit more about the student's background. It may be to understand a little bit more about what they have, having in terms of their life and their goals and their future. And that allows me to be a better teacher, right? So if I know that this is a single mom, who's trying to raise a child all by herself and she's at home, the way I interact and the way I respond as a teacher to her might be very different from the way that I teach, or address some of the issues that a student who has his parents paying all the tuition money, and he's got no job, he doesn't have to work to go to school, however that might be, right? So it just helps me be a better teacher. So I give out 2% extra credit points for students to come and spend 15 minutes with me during my office hours. And going into an online environment, I just decided the office hours can be any time that the student wants, right? So it could be on Skype, it could be on WhatsApp, it could be on any other software that the student chooses. But those have been some of the most productive times as well. Spending one-on-one time. Maybe it's just 5 minutes. You don't have to spend 15 minutes, but 5 minutes just connecting individually. That is one way to really keep a student engaged. So in the beginning of the semester, we'll have the syllabus that will give out all these details regarding what the instructor wants. In terms of running an operations management course, so like I said, I do both undergrad and MBA and operations management course. I just want to share with you here what a course like that looks like in my class. So let me see if see how we can share this right now. Okay, so we look at this class over here. It's called the operations management class. And the operations management class for undergraduate students. So this is the undergraduate students. And here we have all of these opportunities for us to engage in the class, right? So on the first one is announcements. So for this class that just ended, I'll have a few announcements every class day. So I used to teach, let's say this class was Tuesdays. Tuesday morning, I'll put up the PowerPoint and I'll just remind students, open this PowerPoint, be ready for the class, go through this PowerPoint. So I'll have the PowerPoint early available. And there are 2 ways to do that. One is, of course, 2 reasons to do that. One is, of course, to keep the students engaged and be aware that there's content that they have to follow. And second thing is, if there are students who are using only audio, and let's say, they need to download this PowerPoint early, they can't follow along by a share screen. They might not be using a laptop at that, during the time. Maybe their father is using there could be multiple reasons. Everyone may not have a laptop immediately. But if they have the PowerPoint early, they can either print it out or they have it shared, saved on their phone. They can follow along the PowerPoint, right? And most of my PowerPoints, like I said, every slide only has 5 or 6 lines at the most. And the way that helps me is I am not reading from every line on the slide. And that's, that is just not the way I teach. I'll read one line, I'll go through a line, I'll be reading just like I'm doing right now, one line, and then I'll just put that in my own words and continue the conversation. So they're just meant to be, guiding principles for me to be able to deliver what I really like to deliver. So the PowerPoints are going to be there, and any announcement, right? Remember that we have a visit today. Remember that we have a guest speaker today, and take down notes, things like that. That's in the announcements. Then here you go to assignments. And so in my assignments, we had a few guest speakers before the class went fully online. And of course, we can do it online as well, right? Having guest speakers. I'm a proponent of having guest speakers in the class as much as possible. I may be teaching supply chain management, and it might be, like Dr. Chalasani said, it might be completely meaningless unless I have someone from FedEx or Amazon come and talk about what they do, right? We have an Amazon fulfillment center, about 4-5 miles from campus. And so one thing that we did as a class is we went to the Amazon fulfillment center and visited, and we had the general manager there, personally give a tour of the whole plant, and lots of questions, so 2-3 hours the students stayed back over there and asked a lot of questions. And for them, it was so exciting to be in an Amazon warehouse. We all receive Amazon packages, right, or Flipkart. And so when we are able to see how sorting takes place, how cross-docking takes place, many of the concepts I teach about in class, like cross-docking and sorting and distribution warehouses, just come alive, in a visit like that. So that might be a little bit of a luxury for students to be able to do a field visit, but we can always have a guest lecture in class. And so I'll invite somebody from FedEx. He's a global, accounts manager for FedEx, and every semester I invite him to come and talk about what FedEx is doing. 647 planes that fly out regularly every day from different locations in airports around America to different airports around the world, right? And so how does that look like? So he's, showing simulations, he's showing videos of what's going on, he's talking himself, and that really brings the class alive. So I have one of the assignments is writing about guest speakers. So students are not just expected to sit and listen, they are at least just expected to write, one page, what they learned. That's all I'm asking for. One-page memo of what did you learn in today's presentation. And I think that brings out a lot of individual thinking, and it'll be different for every student, right? So that is an assignment over there. Another assignment over here I have is a reading of the book called The Goal. I don't just have the textbook. Some of you may be familiar with The Goal. It's an outstanding book in a business book in general, I would say, and particularly in operations management. So they have to read this book. It's like a novel, and they have to discuss it. So discussion is a big part of our assignment, where in the syllabus, it will be laid out and said, and we'll say, there are 40 chapters in the book. And it's like, and the beginning students are like, oh, well, we have a textbook, and then now we have another book to read. But frankly, that is one of the most fun books to read, right? Once they start reading it, they can't put it down. And that's why you choose a book that is really engaging. And so The Goal is a very engaging book. And so students are expected to read 5 chapters every week, right? Or 2 chapters every week, and post something about what they learned or a question that they might have. That is what a discussion is, right? So what is a face-to-face group discussion of a book? We all sit around, we read a chapter a week, maybe, and then at the end of the week, we all come together in a circle, and we're all talking to each other. Hey, it was interesting that, the author talked about this. And then someone might bring out their concept of what they learned or their response to what they learned. So in an online environment, the student is simply putting in a thought, entering a thought on the discussion board, and then someone else is responding. So you have to make at least 2 discussion posts per week, and you also have to respond to 2 other discussion posts that others have made, which means that students are going to read what others wrote, and then they're going to respond to that as well, right? So that is one way to keep students engaged in discussions. Then I have an exam, and this time the exams were all multiple choice, and so objective type questions, short answer questions, fill in the blanks. It's a little more involved for us to develop those, but I promise you that once you start doing it, which I think is going to become the norm for all of us, right? But once we start creating one quiz, then it's going to be easy, right? We are going to be able to repeat that without much difficulty. So like I said, I can't open multiple things at the same time, so I can't physically show you how you open a quiz. But if you open a quiz and you give time out, right? So we say, okay, the quiz is going to be delivered, or quiz is going to be taken between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. So you're giving a 2-hour window when students have to take that quiz or half an hour window. You can choose whatever time you want, right? You have a start time and you have an end time, and students only have those 30 minutes, and you might have 10 questions or 20 questions. And in that way, you also reduce some of the integrity issues that we'll talk about later, Dr. Chalasani will. But limiting the time for students to take a quiz allows them to focus and respond to that. So that is quiz. And then when we all changed, and because of COVID, and we decided to become fully online, we had to. I had to change one of the most important things I do in a class, which is a community-based learning project. So 25% of the grade in my class goes to students to take principles in operations management and apply that into a local business or a nonprofit or a company or institution in the area, or a small business that is, something that they do. For example, it might be a restaurant. And so students have to apply these principles of operations, techniques, to a local business, because this is when everything comes alive, right? And that is part of my syllabus. Now, when we went online and we were having social distancing policies or regulations, it was impossible for students to go out because a lot of these businesses were closed, right? So I had to change that assignment, right? So I changed the assignment, and then I brought in an assignment on sustainability. And so we talked about a final research project, which was also a group project. Students were in groups, and they had to identify a topic in operations, but then relate that to sustainability initiatives. So, for example, how are companies greening their supply chain, or how are companies recycling and reusing? Or you can take an example like Starbucks and say, how is Starbucks recycling their cups? And so it's an operations problem in a big way, but then it brings in sustainability, which is a fairly new area that we're all involved in, and allows students as a group to be able to think a little bit more about that. So the final research paper just allowed students to continue to interact in a group, but became completely online. It was not a community-based project. It was not helping a local business, but they looked at case studies, they did it as a project, and they submitted that as papers. And then there was a final exam as well that that had details about how to take the final exam. So these are just some examples of how I take a class like operations management, and then I make that relevant to an online experience. For a synchronous class, I'll also put in points for participation. So in my MBA class, it's a lot more. I have 25% of the grade goes into class participation, because a lot of the students that are in the MBA classes are senior level students. They might be executives from local companies, and they have a lot to offer. And I don't want to be the lecturer that is standing for 3 hours, and giving a lecture, right? It's the most boring thing. So the way to make it engaged and interactive is to have student participation. And so in the syllabus, 25% of the MBA class is participation, and it's outstanding because you'll have students from, SC Johnson talking about strategy or talking about supply chain there. You'll have someone from FedEx talking about supply chain there. And it's just so enriching. In an undergrad class, it's a lot less. So it's only 10% of the class goes towards participation. But even when we went online, I'm able to look at students that are actively participating because they're either raising their hands, or they have a comment, or they're saying something in class. And that allows me to remember when I'm grading, okay, how involved was the student, and how much can I, does the student deserve in terms of class participation? So those are, some of the key principles. So the goal is a additional book that I have for operations, and the discussion of the book in an online environment. Of course, quizzes are only 30% of the grade. And then writing about guest speakers or visits that we had, case study presentations. So the cases are not here as a submission, but before we ended the class, we had case studies that students were presenting in every class. You can do that in an online environment too, where you can mute, just like we are doing here. We mute everybody else's mics, and then only the group that is presenting. They work virtually for the week, and then 4 or 5 of them in a group, right? You decide the groups. They present. They have an opportunity to present their PowerPoint just like we are presenting, and show their slide, and allow others to participate and show teamwork and things like that. So we have to break up the class. We can't do a 3-hour lecture. We can't even do a 1-hour lecture, in an online environment. We have to have additional activities like this in order to be able to truly keep the class engaged, but not just to keep it engaged or for the sake of keeping engaged, but for us to be able to, enhance learning from each other and create an environment where it's really interesting, and it actually can be more interesting than a regular class. So with that, I'll turn it over again to Dr. Chalasani.
Now, I'm going to demonstrate one of the classes and management information systems related topic. It's a 7-week course, and I'll talk about some of the features uh, of Canvas, the learning management system, as well as concepts related to student engagement that we touched upon earlier during this session. So let me share my screen, and please bear with me as I go to one of these windows. So I hope you are able to see my screen. So if there are any technical difficulties, please let me know. So this is a Canvas course where you could see all the content. This is an MBA course, a 7-week MBA course, and this is the home page. On the home page, you could see all the content organized nicely. It's a 7-week course, 7 modules that students need to go through. And each module is organized this way, as you could see. And if you go to the left-hand side, uh, like in any learning management system, you would see some of these same things displayed. In addition to the home page, you would also have the announcements that you make. Um, you can go to the announcements tab and find out all the announcements. So for example, these are the announcements that I posted in this class. This class ended just about a week ago, and the announcements, like I mentioned earlier, are a really good way to keep in touch with students. This is one announcement that I posted that said, hey, I graded these 2 assignments, and then I left a lot of feedback, and these are some of the common errors I saw when you submitted your work, and I corrected some of these common errors. You might want to take a closer look at it, and this is what is coming up for you to complete. Not just announcements, but all the assignments you could find in this area. The discussions that students need to participate, there's a link for that. The grades, people link is where you could see the class roster, and you can put them into groups, like Professor Corvilla mentioned, into multiple groups for group discussions, group participation. All the files that you are going to upload to the for this course, they would be available in the files section. The syllabus, as you know, the syllabus is an important component with all the due dates and the topics that you are going to cover. And that syllabus, we normally have a PDF link to the syllabus, PDF document, and a link in the syllabus to that PDF document. And in addition, we also have the due dates and when is everything due. And the due dates are linked to each one of these module assignments or the exams. You could link them so that students can get an idea of when everything is due in just one place. And then you can set up quizzes. You can you have links to modules. You have tutoring links. If students, some of the undergraduate classes, we have online tutoring help, so students can click on this tutoring link and then find help with tutoring. The analytics is very crucial for online classes because you can find how much students are engaged. I can pinpoint what pages in my course that each student visited. So, and I can show the correlation. For example, if a student is not spending too much time in the course, or is not going to some of these pages, reviewing the materials and things like that, I can see that the grade is suffering in the classroom, in the class. And so the analytics tool helps us figure out how students are utilizing the course content and how much time they're spending in the class. So let's go and look at some of these individual pages. So for example, as I create module 1, the module 1 overview. I write some introduction to module 1, and then I have a video that introduces module 1 as well. And normally my videos, I create these videos and I post them on YouTube, and I embed them into the course pages. So if I play this, this is about 5 minutes and 40-second video. It would go through. It will introduce the class, and um, so those could be embedded, and students also have the option of watching those videos on YouTube itself. They could just use this link to move to YouTube full-fledged and then watch it completely on YouTube. Um, and then these are the video. These are my own lectures that where I'm face to face with them. And some of the technical topics, I know we received questions on how do we convey the technical topics with calculations and computations. For example, if you are teaching accounting and then you want to make sure that students know how to do the debits and credits, you could create a video, a screencast video. So this is a course, this is a video on how to create databases. I give them practice activities. I want them to create those the practice database as I guide them through the video. And these are some of my videos where I'm not in front of the camera, but I do talk about how they could use a tool like Microsoft Access or any other database tool to go step by step through these. We talked about the syllabus, and now I'm coming back to the assignments. uh, I did refer to making it practical, making it very relevant, making it interesting for students earlier. So this is an assignment where they have to construct a database and they have to get the data into the database and make practical decisions. So this is I throw them a fictitious company called Simply Credit Card. I set up that company with its background, and I give more detail in an attached Word document. Uh, and then I divide it into three different parts. One is they have to build database tables, they have to construct database reports, um, they have to construct queries, and then they have to construct reports, and then they have to make business decisions based on this data. So the more details, as detailed you can make for these assignments, that's better. And when I grade these assignments, it's very crucial that you can give them you give them really robust feedback. In this case, in a technical assignment, text feedback is not is good, but it's not great, right? So in this case, I'm using a test student. So let's say that this test student got 65%, and 65% is not a passing grade in this class. So they have to get 80% or above, which is approximately B or above, to be satisfactory. So uh, when they do so poorly, I give them a little bit of text feedback, but I also tell them you made a lot of mistakes in queries, and I corrected your database with correction, and I attached a database file. So if you look at this bottom of the screen, I have the test student feedback database that I attached, where I correct each of their where they went. Uh, their work was incorrect, so that they could improve it in future assignments or future exams. Unless we provide this kind of feedback, it would be really tough for them for students to be on a path of continuous improvement, in my view. So the detailed feedback, depending on the class, if it's technical classes, you want to leave these annotated spreadsheets and databases and so on and so forth. If it's management classes where they're writing papers, you want to give annotated Word documents on the managerial paper that they wrote. So a lot of these techniques are useful for improving student learning. We talked about announcements, and so let me go to discussions. Discussions, there is almost always a forum. In every class there is a forum for course questions. They could ask any question at any time, and normally our policy is to respond within 24 hours. um, and many of our professors, they're very prompt. They respond within a couple of hours. And then this is the break the ice kind of discussion. Introduce yourself to the class, and it's very especially important for us to greet them back when they introduce themselves, even if it's very brief. So for example, for this student I say, welcome to MBA 720. Glad to note that you have strategic perspective, and so on and so forth. And similarly, another student, I might personalize my message beyond the welcome statement. I would personalize my message based on what they talked about. So if you have 40 students, it's really imperative that you respond to each one of those 30. In my classes there are like 35, 40 students, and so I do take that time, so that they understand that we are taking their learning very seriously. And then the actual discussion. So this is one of the first discussions in my class. I asked them to bring in their experience of using technologies in their professional life. And if they don't have work experience, I give them some case studies that they could respond based on. And they have to engage in discussions. So that the discussions become more meaningful, I divide them into different groups with smaller number of students. Um, and I divide them into groups myself. I don't try to allow them to self-select. That's because I want to bring in students with different backgrounds after they introduce themselves, so that multiple perspectives could be heard. And uh, then during the discussion, students are posting these messages, they're responding. And then I do post. I'm quite active in discussions, so I do post. So for example, for this student I say, very good discussion, you brought in these topics, but how about this? Sometimes I use these pictures. I tell this discussions, in my view, is a way to enhance their learning beyond what they're already learning through from other students. Then I give them a new, slightly different concepts related to the discussion topic, but I ask them to bring in their work experience related to this topic. So this might be an aha moment for them. Oh, this is another thing that I could do with the same concept. And those I find are very rewarding, not just for students at least, and also for me, because sometimes when they talk about their work experience, I can learn from them as well, from those students who are working quite extensively. So with that, I would request. Um, oh, actually, it's my topic. So let me just go back and then share the PowerPoint. I'm switching between these screens, so please bear with me. So um, in this slide, what we are trying to talk about is assessment and academic integrity. Many of you asked questions on how do we prevent students from cheating on exams, from collaborating and then all of them submitting wonderful work. If you go with normal distribution, you always know that many students are in the middle, some students are at the highest performance levels, and some students do not perform as well, right? Um, so some of the things that we have done is I use randomized quizzes. So for example, uh, if there is an exam, there was a course, a project management course at the undergraduate level that I created a few years ago. I had a question bank of about 350 questions, and then I asked students to work on, I select about 60 questions to be randomly posed to the students. So each student gets a different set of questions that they need to address, and I'll give them maybe about 2 hours to complete those 60 questions. And that is by timing the quiz as well as randomizing the questions, you are minimizing the likelihood that students can really do can cheat on the exams and tests. And many of our colleagues have done the same thing. Sorry. Like Dr. Terry McGovern, he's very knowledgeable as well in creating the exams. Uh, for example, you can also look at an exam and then create different versions of the exam. So this question could be the same thing, but you can give different data sets, and you can randomize the data sets. When you, let's say that a question involves a data set and it has an Excel file. In Excel, you can easily create random numbers using a formula and provide a different data for each student, so that they don't have too much time in that limited time to consult with other students and collaborate together. The one more thing that I would like to add is online proctoring tools. So you can also contract with a company to make sure that students are proctored while they're taking an exam. This has some controversy on its own, but because some students might feel very uncomfortable being watched while they're taking an exam. And many of the online proctoring tools, they also suggest they work very well with a lockdown browser. So what does a lockdown browser mean? It means that while the student is taking the exam, they will not be able to switch to any other application. So their browser is locked down, they're taking the exam, they're answering the questions in the learning management system, but they will not be able to go back to, for example, Google and look for an answer on Google. They will not be able to go to some other application on their computer and go to and utilize that application. If they are being monitored and proctored, the monitoring and the proctoring companies would ask them to keep everything away, like the cell phones and any other computers and things like that. So they are in a space that where only they are in front of the computer where they are taking the exam, laptop they are taking the exam, and nothing else is brought in. So now let's go to the next slide. Okay. One of the things that I talked about is video creation. So how do we use, what kind of video creation tools are there? Kaltura is a very good video creation tool. Kaltura is an open source video creation tool. So you might be able to use many features of Kaltura to create videos. Of course, you can create videos using your iPhone or smartphone and use that as well. um, some of the advantages that Kaltura gives, for example, is it has it integrates with learning management system like Canvas. So it becomes seamless for you to integrate Kaltura videos into Canvas. Uh, I use Camtasia, the second one here, very heavily. This is not only useful for video creation, but it is also very, very useful for editing videos. So for example, if I want to bring two videos together, splice them up, and then mix them, I could use Camtasia. Camtasia provides really good tools to do that. So think of the video editing as, you know, a film editing kind of thing. So that's what you're doing with a tool like Camtasia. You can create videos through other means as well, like Zoom, WebEx lectures, for example. You could record them, and then you could embed them. Any which way you can create videos is fine, but videos can really promote that learning for students. One of the things in the United States is is that we are mandated by the federal government to do to help students with disabilities. So any video that we have, it also needs to have captions for those to help people with hearing impairments. So in order to do that, I create my videos, I upload them to YouTube. An advantage of YouTube is that it creates those captions automatically. Once I upload it, within the next 30 minutes, my videos are captioned, and that is great. Also, each time it would be nice if you can get a transcript of the video and post them. So for example, those who are visually impaired might uh, are might benefit from an audio transcript of the video. So that is also another thing that we tend to do. Um, let me move to the next screen. So I know I'm emphasizing videos, so just don't look at this whole slide, just the last column here. How do you promote video presence? So for each course, we have course introduction videos. And then we talked about video conferencing with students. And then for each module and our unit, I have video introduction videos for each module. And then sometimes I also leave video feedback for students. That could be a personalized video feedback for each student. Might be too tough in a large class, but at least if you give feedback on an exam with all the common mistakes that you have seen and post it to all the students, that could be a really good way to enhance student learning. And then we talked about instructional videos and step-by-step tutorials. Um, these are great things as well. So now I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Terry McGovern, to demonstrate a course on leadership. So um, he could go over some of these concepts in more detail on a different course, while emphasizing some of the concepts we talked about earlier. So Terry, if you are here, I'm going to stop the screen and invite you to join us.
Okay, thanks, Suresh. I appreciate that. And actually, I see all the text here where people are saying good evening. I say good morning. And this is rewarding for me to be able to participate in this. I'm a devout Catholic. After I retired from the U.S. Air Force, I taught at a Catholic institution that had been formerly an all-female institution. It went co-ed about 1980, the early 80s. And one of the more rewarding opportunities I had in that setting was running a leadership workshop for some seminarians who were studying to be parish priests. So with this, I'm going to share my screen and just share with you an example of a leadership type course that I'm currently teaching. And this is a course that is focused on inclusion, and we do it through looking at the multi-generational workforce. So with people living so much longer in the modern age, we now have upwards of 5 generations working side by side. And in this course, we look at some of the frictions that can happen when you have different generations working together, different worldviews, different norms and attitudes. And then through the course, we talk about stereotyping, biases, prejudice, how to be more inclusive, and we also address conflict management and negotiation. And so this is a 2-credit-hour graduate level course, and I do teach differently for my older adult students that are grad students versus undergrad, and I'll talk about that in a bit with andragogy. But in this adult graduate program, the course is set up to allow the adults more interaction, and that interaction in terms of life experiences, work experiences, and it's one of the differences of how adult students learn versus traditional undergraduates who may not have as much experience. So in the course, you'll see that this is how it's laid out. We have the announcements and the assignments, etc. In a typical 7-week course, I will have between 25 and 30 announcements. And so the announcements, and this one is actually a little backwards. If we go to the announcements, it's anything from a welcome to the course, reminders of what needs to be done each week. When the announcement goes out, the students are immediately notified that there's been an update in the course. I give them general feedback to the group in terms of how I'm seeing them perform on some of the assignments. And so with the, I find using the announcements to be very beneficial in terms of communicating to the course as a collective. Then the assignments, one of the ways that I try to work adult learning assignments is it's much more hands-on, reflective, and with the adult students, I'm always trying to give them knowledge that they can go out and use in their workplaces the next day. Just one way to think about it. So in this particular course, every week they have discussion posts that they have to respond to. And with the discussions, I do, as you can see here, I do put a mandate on a word count. And the reason I do that is because I have found, and I've been doing online learning since 2003, but I have found over the years that if I don't provide them a little bit of structure in terms of a word count, I will see anywhere from a couple sentences to much longer. Although I will say the longer posts are far more rare. I have had times where I limit the word count between like 250 and 750 words. And again, the reason I do that is I'm trying to promote interaction online. And if somebody has a very long post, other students just won't take the time to read through the whole thing. So it is a management of trying to get the students to interact with one another and to do it in a way that still provides robustness. Now, you'll also see that I ask that they follow APA, and APA as the style format, it does require them to use cited sources, and we talk about that when they respond, I want them agreeing or disagreeing, but using evidence from peer-reviewed journals to back up their arguments. So if we go back to assignments, in this particular course, the midterm exam is a little bit different because we are learning about different generations. And in learning about different generations, there's a hypothesis called the contact hypothesis. And what the contact hypothesis promotes is the idea that when we interact with someone who's different from us, that interaction can help us gain greater awareness and understanding of the person that isn't from our group, so to speak. And this can promote us to be more empathetic, more inclusive in our interactions. So the purpose of this assignment is to have the students go out and interview someone from a different generation. It has to be someone outside of their family, someone that's at least 20 years older or 20 years younger. And it's a 3-part assignment. So the first part is they do the interview, and in relation to the interview, they have to boil down the interview to about a 7 to 9 minute sample. And this requires them to do video editing. And so here's a skill that I'm trying to teach them. And many of my adult, especially older adult students, have limited understanding of how to edit videos or how to, shoot something with their iPhone and then clip it together in a meaningful way. So I provide them resources on how to do that. So that's a skill that they learn. But then they take this 7 to 9 minute video, they upload it, and then that's part 2 is the students will, in this one, part 2, they're going to do a reflection on the assignment. So again, going back to andragogy, a great part of graduate school is making sense of the experiences that we've had. So reflective writing is a very common assignment that I'll give to my graduate students, where they think about experiences that they've had. In this case, it would be experiences with either direct reports or supervisors, where they then reflect on everything they're learning about the different generations and how they had interactions and what the result of that interaction was. And based on the new knowledge that they're learning, how might they have approached the situation differently? So going forward, when they have these interactions, they can be approach them in a more wise and knowledgeable way. So there is a reflective writing that's done. And then I have them interact with one another through part 3, that they have to watch the videos of at least 2 other peers and then respond to them and make some comments on what they noticed, what they learned from it. Did it align with what the research has shown about the different generations, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a 3-part assignment. It actually takes them a couple weeks to do it, because in the first week, they post the video, they post their reflection, and then in the second week, they watch one another's videos, and then they discuss and interact about what they saw in the different interviews that other students had done. So this is one way that this is done in this course, in terms of instead of in grad school, I generally don't give multiple choice quizzes or tests. I do in the undergrad, but in grad school, I tend not to do that. Another assignment that they have is Harvard University has a implicit association test, where the students can go out and find if maybe they have an unconscious bias towards older or younger people. And this increases their self-awareness. And this is one way we can overcome bias, and we can promote inclusiveness, is becoming more self-aware. So the students actually take this test, and then they write a reflective piece on what they learned. And it's interesting. Many students are surprised that they either heavily favor older or younger people, and they had no idea that this was something that an aspect to their personality that they didn't realize. And then weekly, they have weekly discussion posts that they do in this course. So I have lectures that I post, and the way this course is set up, in the first 4 weeks, we look at the different generations. They watch lectures about what the research has shown about the different generations. Excuse me. I also have them view a video of major events that different generations would have witnessed growing up. And this aligns with Piaget's theory on human development. And so they see, what a young boomer child would have seen as an adolescent through media, what they were experiencing that shapes their worldview later on. And that's terrific. When I have younger students, I'll never forget, I have one young student who was shocked to learn that her parents were born in an America that only had 48 states at the time, because Alaska and Hawaii did not become states until 1950. And so this student was amazed that her parents were born in a different geographic America than what she had known her entire life. So they go through these videos and then they discuss them, what they saw, what they learned. They bring in outside research that aligns with that as well. And then in the last 2 weeks of the course, we focus on conflict management as well as negotiation. And in this course, we're only focusing 1 week each, so it's really a best practice to be able to deal with personal conflict and how to negotiate when we've had conflict take place. And to that end, there is a group project at the end of the 7 weeks. The students are divvied up into teams of 3 to 4 students each, and they're presented a case. And the case study is a business case study promoted or distributed through Harvard Publishing, where the students are presented a work situation where there's a conflict taking place. In many of the cases, the conflicts are multi-generational. And so then the students go through what they would recommend based on what they learned about the different generations, what they've learned about conflict in negotiation, and they provide a PowerPoint presentation that they do as a group, and then they upload. And then finally, I'm interested in how the group worked together. That is, who participated, who did not participate. So they do a little evaluation on each other, and then that just helps inform me in terms of how the group, and I do reserve the right to alter a grade if a group member is found not to have engaged in this assignment. So this is an example of a leadership type course that I would do at the graduate level. And then at the undergraduate level, the largest change between the two would be the use of quizzes. And so this is from an undergraduate capstone course we teach in the business department. It focuses on strategy. And what I have found is that, you know, there are things that we can do as faculty to dissuade students from wanting to cheat or plagiarize. We can set up our assignments. And so one of the ways we can do this is by providing shorter assignments, especially at the adult level when I'm dealing with adult students, shorter assignments that pertain to their workplace. It's really hard to plagiarize when you're writing about your own personal experience. And likewise, the research has shown that high stakes, very long exams can promote cheating. So what I have gone to is, instead of having high stake midterm, high stake final, I have the students do quizzes every week. So in this was a 14-week course. They had a total of 14 different quizzes, which accounted for 10% of their grade. The midterm and the final each accounted for only 5% of their grade. And when we shifted to online, what I find that there is a method to monitor the students while they're taking these exams. It's called Respondus. And this is where you can have cameras on the students. It can lock down their browser to prevent them looking at other sites. I tried that the first week of this course, and then I gave up on it because too many students were having technical difficulties downloading the Respondus browser. So what I find to ensure that the students, that the quiz isn't just an exercise of them looking up something on the web, I give them much tighter timelines. So this is a 10-question quiz. In class, they would have about 5 minutes to work through it, no books, no media to assist them with it. Online, they'll get about 4 minutes to work through those 10 different questions. I can also set up the quizzes where it draws from a pool of questions, so no two students will see the exact same quiz. And I use a textbook from McGraw-Hill. McGraw-Hill actually has a test bank. They divvy up the test bank for each chapter. There's at least 100 questions. The questions are aligned to Bloom's taxonomy and different levels of difficulty. And so I can set up the quiz through McGraw-Hill to say, you know, I want a random pool and I want 10% of the questions to be level 1 easy, 10% to be level 3 difficult, and the other 80% to be medium level questions. And so then it can go about doing it that way. In terms of the exams, I can set up multiple versions of the exams. And one of the things, because you're always worried about students screen capturing and sharing the questions, but one of the things I have found with the exams is when I know that students are friends and working together, I do make a point to make sure they have different versions of the test, so they're not tempted to share the questions with one another. And so that's just an example of how I deal with quizzes at the undergraduate level. Again, I try to make the exams more low stakes, so they're not as stressed or anxious or feel like they might need to cheat on them. I try to give them more quizzes, so weekly they're checking in as well. Okay, so then moving on, I think that the next topic, if we could, I'll stop sharing my screen. If I can get on the right screen here. Okay, there we go. And so if you could bring up the slide, I believe the next thing that we were to discuss was, let me see. Oh, non-traditional, yeah, adult learning techniques. So that's the andragogy. And I will bring up quickly the principles of andragogy. Okay, there we go. So andragogy is the idea that as adults we learn differently than traditional undergrads. And I was just getting a message to hurry up. So the adult learning theory is the idea that adults like to have options. I try to do this in my online courses as well. For example, when they do the interview, it's fairly wide open who they choose to interview. I only ask that they not do interview family members. Sometimes I have adults that have challenges with interview, so I do have an alternate assignment set up for them where they can do a writing assignment instead of doing the face-to-face interview. Of course, bringing in their experiences. One of the things I point out to adult students is when we've had experiences that stick with us, especially in the workplace, one of three things can happen. We can learn the right lessons, the wrong lessons, or no lessons. And so the point of graduate school is to reflect on those experiences, what happened and what should have happened, what could have happened based on what they're learning in the course. Likewise, adults are interested in learning things that they can take to work tomorrow. And so it's also common in my courses that I'm always looking out for apps that they can download. I have an app that I recommend to students called Journey, which is a journaling app to help them because there's research that shows effectiveness for journaling in terms of executive practices. So I always try to empower them with different tools that they can use, frameworks, of course, but also digital tools that they can use. And then finally, the idea of process-centered versus content-oriented, that they are interested in how do I get from point A to point B. So I do try to provide them some structure, but not too much. The other aspect that I was asked to talk about is the idea of digital badges. And this is something that I just recently completed a dissertation in. So digital badges are micro-credentials. And in the States now we're seeing a lot of interest in micro-credentials. And there's good reason for it. One, we're in the 21st century. So using traditional transcripts to capture student records is, well, one researcher had said the greatest innovation in transcripting is we move from sheepskin to paper. And so digital badges really represent the next evolution of this. And the idea behind the digital badge, it's native to Canvas now, is when students, for example, complete a chapter. So I know AB talked about operations management. say they complete a chapter in project management. And in that chapter, they learned about work breakdown structures. They learned about, putting together different project management, the names escaping me now, but different matrices for setting the project up with earliest time, latest times, etc. We can take those different skills and represent those as a badge issued to the student. The badge then, the student can share on social media. The student can share it on LinkedIn, Facebook, whoever they want to share it with. There is some interest now with the COVID situation about issuing immunity badges. This is an idea being discussed where, once you are deemed by a hospital to be immune, the hospital could potentially issue you a badge. You go to work, you show the badge. And what makes the badges useful is they're secure and they're verifiable. So they're secure in the sense that they're encrypted. They're verifiable in the sense that if an employer looks at a badge, they can click on a link that takes them to the issuer's webpage. So they can verify that the badge was issued by the university. Additionally, the badge has all sorts of metadata inside. And this is everything the student did. You can have videos in it. You can, have proof, evidence of test scores, et cetera, et cetera. It just provides a lot more detail about student accomplishment than what we see on a traditional transcript that just lists a class name along with the grade. So that's a little bit on digital badges. And it's something that I see as we go into the future is going to become more prevalent with online learning and being able to verify what someone has learned. So I think that's what I was asked to cover today. Was there anything else?
Did we want to move to questions, Ankita?
Yes, Dr. Kutlu, definitely. I would just like to first thank all of you for giving us a lovely insight on the different tools that you use at your university. So we just have one question, Dr. Kurvila, which is in a synchronous class, when we're taking a quantitative paper, how do we sort of explain problems which has numericals in it in a synchronous class?
That's a good question. Yes, it can certainly be a challenge to be able to do that. I think some faculty may just stand in front of a whiteboard or a blackboard and have a camera, face them and, be able to work out a problem if they want. I faced something very similar, actually. I was trying to develop or show a concept of cross-docking in my class, and it needed to draw a figure. I needed to draw a figure to to work it out. And I tried, what I did is I took a piece of paper and then I, wrote it down and I, moved it like that. And then, we're always a mirror image. So we don't know if it's going this way or that way. So it's always a little bit of confusion. And actually my student, so I got to give the credit to the student, he said, Abby, why don't you just use Paint, right? And so Paint is a software that we, all have as part of our, packaged installations. And so I just did that. I just went on Paint, shared the screen. And then, you can type numbers or you can write, and then it's immediately shared over there. So, it is a very relevant question because I just went through that recently. But yeah, that'll be the easiest. If you're working out a problem, then, just using something that you can write, and Paint is a very easy one to get on to respond. So.
Okay, great. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Kurvila. We have one more question that's just come in, which says, what are the challenges faced in ICT tools for testing and evaluation?
I think Dr. Chalasani can answer that question.
We did talk about different aspects of testing. For example, we could use a lockdown browser, we could use randomized quizzes, we could just time the exam so that there is not enough time for them to collaborate. But the challenges that we hear sometimes is students come from different socio-economic backgrounds. So if their internet connection is not great, that's one challenge that we face. If their internet connection goes down, then how do we accommodate them, right? So to be able to do that, we could have different versions of the exam. So if a student, for example, could not successfully complete and they show proof that they have not been able to complete it uh, due to internet going down or something like that, then we could ask them to retake the exam at a different time, but give a slightly different version of the exam. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, sir. Yes, and also just to add to that, the numbers that we face here are, or rather, the strength of our students is a lot more, where we
Mhm.
have on an average anywhere between 50 to 60 easily students per class. So this is definitely one challenge that we do face as a recurring challenge. So I think this different versions of the same test might be quite effective. Thank you, Dr. Chalasani.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So I think that's about it, Dr. Kuruvilla. These are the questions, and I think the other questions that the participants had already raised has been addressed through the course of the session. So I think it's time for us to close. And I would take this opportunity to thank you, Dr. Kuruvilla, for joining us, and also Dr. Chalasani and Dr. McGovern. Despite the time difference, despite being on the other end of the globe, we were able to make this international webinar possible. And that's all thanks to the cooperation and support that you have lended us. So on behalf of Stella Maris College, thank you so much, Dr. Kuruvilla, for being with us today.
I just want to say a word of thanks as well. First of all, to my colleagues, Dr. Chalasani and Dr. McGovern, both of them made themselves available in a very short notice. So I appreciate that, and I think when more people are involved, it becomes a lot more powerful and valuable. Just to kind of remind us a few things that we hope that we've been able to convey. One was just on learning management systems. I think colleges in India would have to choose what they want based on Google Hangout seems to be the most one for synchronous classes that people have converted to quickly. So just identifying the learning management systems with the administration, and then I would really encourage faculty involvement to make that decision. Right? I mean, what is most valuable? So that is one thing. The other thing was about engagement, both synchronous and asynchronous. So I think we've touched a little bit about that. And then the development of content like video, quizzes, assignments, case studies, and getting students engaged as much as possible. And then, just a snapshot of different classes that we teach over here, whether it's in management information systems or, leadership and development, and then operations management. So those were the, goals. I personally also want to say thank you to the leadership of Stella Maris College for the principal, vice principal, and Ankita, you and the team for setting up and all the pilot work that we did in the meeting. So thank you for doing that. Thank you to all the participants. Amazing questions, and I'm just seeing all the thank you notes. It's just so fulfilling. We are all learning and we are all changing and growing. I think one thing that we have to remember is that we can't hold ourselves too hard. We can't. We can't just hold ourselves to a standard that doesn't even exist in teaching because everyone is learning. So don't be too hard on yourself. I think you just have to see it as there are new ways of learning, and we're all trying to do the best we can. And some of the things that we can't control, we cannot control COVID, we cannot control an online environment. I mean, we are moving in that direction. So embrace what we can, right? What we can't control, we embrace. And then just realizing that this may be the new norm. I think, as we think about higher education moving forward, we probably may not come back to a class environment the way we are all familiar with and the way we all know. But I think we have to think about that not as a fearful outcome of what life is going to be, but it's an opportunity, right? What could we do? What could we play as a leadership role in teaching better online? What could we take this as an opportunity and develop expertise that did not exist? And maybe for some of the older professors, it might be a little difficult just with challenges, being the technology. But I think just thinking of it as an opportunity, for us to be able to learn and grow. So I think just having that positive frame of mind in moving forward in the next few years, I think it's important. I also want to offer, and this is also on behalf of my colleagues here, that we do visit India often. And, if there's an opportunity or if we want to set something up where we want to do a one-day full workshop, at Stella Maris, I think we have the opportunity or, the next step might be something like that. So if you want to do that, then we're always open to the idea. Finally, just the University of Wisconsin Parkside. I do have to say a few words about that.
Yes.
We have 8 graduate programs, so 8 master's programs. So if anyone from so many colleges represented across India, if you have students that are trying to search for, an education overseas, higher education, we are a public university, so we are a non-profit. Students must be aware that there are agents that sell profit institutions and non-profit institutions. And so we are non-profit and we're supported by the state of Wisconsin. Our business department is AACSB accredited, which is the highest level of accreditation for business schools worldwide. And our goal is to offer an education that is accessible, that is affordable, and to be in the forefront of what we're doing now, but also in online education. So if any of your students are interested in pursuing a higher education in the US, UW Parkside, so it's uwp.edu, University of Wisconsin Parkside.edu. Application process is not very cumbersome. 45 minutes, I think it'll take for someone to fill it online. And we also have scholarships for international students. So students that are coming from multiple countries can apply for a scholarship and automatically be entered as part of the application. And we're always interested in partnerships. We have so many around the world, and we continue to look for more. Our recent ones in India have been with 1+3 or 2+2, where students do 2 years in India and then followed by that by 2 years over here. So if administration folks in the seminar are involved in chatting more about that and learning more and exploring mutually beneficial partnerships, please let me know as well. My email is abey.kuruvilla, Kuruvilla, @uwp.edu. So abby.kuruvilla@uwp.edu. It's the same spelling as the Indian cricketer from Mumbai. He's just 1 foot taller than me. So if you need to reach me, you can reach me anytime. But if we can help in any way to move this forward and take next steps, we are always happy to. So thank you again to my colleagues, and thank you to Stella Maris.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kuruvilla, for that offer. And like you said, yes, we should look at this as an opportunity where on a regular basis, we wouldn't have had this opportunity to connect halfway across the globe. But today we do have that opportunity thanks to the situation that we're in. So our heartfelt gratitude to you, dear professors, for taking time off and for being with us today. I would also like to thank our principal, Dr. Sister Rosie Joseph, Dr. Lima Francis, the Dean of Commerce and Business Studies, our management and faculty of the Department of Commerce shift to Stella Maris College, who have been a pillar of support in carrying out this international webinar. I would also like to thank our participants for being with us today. We hope that as an organizing team, we have fulfilled your expectations. And as Dr. Kuruvilla already mentioned, if you have any queries, you could always reach out to him directly, or you could reach out to us and we could forward it and try to solve your queries as seamlessly as possible. So on that note, I would also like to remind the participants that the feedback link is posted in your comment section. Please do remember to fill it up. That being said, thank you, Dr. Kuruvilla. Thank you, Dr. Chalasani, for being with us. And also thank you to Dr. McGowan. Hopefully to see you soon.
Pleased to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.